All right, we are on question 38. What can and do demons do? We got partially through this yesterday.
Yeah, we went through possession, sickness, physical infirmities.
We just want to look at a few more examples. What do demons do? A couple of examples of demonization in the New Testament. Can you think of them?
Your demonstration. That was biblical, man. I think that was Bible. No, it's a great mistake. On public.
When Philip went down to Samaria, Acts chapter 8, and preached Christ to them, the people with one accord gave heed to those things which Philip spoke, hearing and seeing the miracles which he did, specifically this: unclean spirits crying with a loud voice came out of many that were possessed with them. That's a fairly explicit reference to demon possession.
You're on Acts chapter
16.
She was given the spirit of divinity or something. Yeah. Was Acts 8?
Acts 8 verses 6 and 7 is an example of possession.
They can't tell the future, though, just the past. Well, they can give certain general records to the future. They always do. This is general. Because the demons can control events and do things to make things happen. They seem to have some kind of, well, they have influence. They perceive
You're all right. Acts chapter 16. A certain maid possessed with a spirit of divination. Now, in that particular case, the girl was possessed, and the spirit that possessed her was a divining spirit. Right? That's Acts 16:16. Divination?
figure out future things.
Yes. Precisely what we were talking about, making revelations.
How can we know that? Can they really know the future? They don't know.
Well, you have to remember that demons have been around since they were created. So conceivably, they could be 15,000 years old, some of these demons. And likewise, in league with Satan, they've had all this time to learn by experience. They can generally tell, I believe, how a situation is moving. They can tell by human behavior, I believe, what humans are thinking.
So they like to go around, like tell the people around the person to figure what's going on.
I think so. I think they, because they're spiritual beings, here's something that's difficult for us to comprehend. The Bible describes Christ as the one who searches the minds and hearts. Right? Now, if Christ, or God, who is spirit, is capable of discerning the minds and thoughts of individuals on an omniscient level, the possibility may be there for lesser spiritual beings to be able to do the same thing on a lesser degree. They're not limited to flesh and blood, five senses as we are. Plus, being able to make observations on the five senses level, I believe that they have that extra ability to discern spirits.
Like the 12 divining spirits, so maybe in probably 3 years you got better at it.
I believe so. That would be the explanation for yes, divination, and false messages, lying signs and wonders. It would be an explanation for false doctrines.
There are people that believe that they can read an individual's mind, an individual's thought. But a person's desires, and when they're going to these people, they've discussed it with other people.
You've all heard of extrasensory perception, right? Now, there's probably more to the, like, what does psychologists say, that we only use 10% of our brains? There's several fields of scientific study on this sort of parapsychology, psychokinetics, all that kind of stuff, where they actually are studying the paranormal. And there's no question that it has that our brains, as created, are capable of doing phenomenal things. The difficulty on our part is that we are incapable of discerning between that which comes from us and that which comes from the spirit world when we get into this, because we just have no known barriers, right? So that's dangerous to get into that.
The girl that was on that tape, God of this age, and she was on that other one too, with Bandit, she was on there too. She stated one of the things she lost was the ability to read people's minds.
When she was saved.
She apparently might even have been saved before she went into it.
Joanna Mickelson.
She was saved, she says, when she was in high school.
I believe that's the explanation, that that when a human being fulfills certain mental conditions, that they are susceptible to marauding spirits. You know? And as such, those spirits with their greater powers are able to use the human mind and body to accomplish their purposes. So that would be the explanation for some people having the ability to bend spoons over the radio waves. Like there was a guy in the Sioux 10 or 15 years ago, I remember. It was a big thing. It was written up in the paper, and he was on CKCY, and he was some kind of a medium or whatever, and he was able to, actually, his spirit was able to go places and bend spoons, things, in people's homes that were listening to the program. Levitation, I believe all that is the explanation for that sort of stuff.
There are certain so-called evangelists that say that you lay a cloth on your handkerchief on your radio and they speak and then they use it for healing. And that's got to be demonic. There's got to be powers in there. Dr. Rebecca Brown talks about people that willingly, even when they became saved, still had this problem of being able to see into the spirit world. Mm-hmm. And they had to ask the Lord to sever that, because they knew they weren't supposed to be. And they were seeing horrible things.
It's just in the examples, some of the examples that we read, some spirits are actually capable of paralyzing a person's vocal cords or interfering with the communication system as created in human beings to be able to cause dumbness. Others are capable of causing physical blindness. Others are capable of producing epileptic type seizures. Then other spirits are quite capable of masquerading as good, moral, upright ministers of the Bible. Right? So they don't always take a gross form or a violent form, but certainly deceptive. There was one woman that was bowed down with the spirit of infirmity. Right? So there was a demon that was controlling her, her bone structure and just weighing her down. Demons of insanity. These fellows that were possessed with a legion of spirits, cutting themselves, immense physical strength. There's an explanation. Look at Samson. I believe it works on both the good and the positive side. We all know the story of Samson and how that when he fulfilled the conditions that God laid down as maintaining his Nazarite vow, and kept his hair long and stayed away from wine and women and so forth, that God blessed him with great physical strength because the Spirit of God came upon him. And so God's Spirit endowed him with massive strength, superhuman strength. Well, why couldn't that happen on an even lesser level among human beings? And that the example of the men in Gadara illustrates that.
Example of modern day martial arts.
Perhaps.
What's it called? Goes right back to Hinduism. Every bit of it. Not a part of it that doesn't. Even the cries matter. All are calling to deity. The claims they have on the putting the hand up against a man's face and the whole body be electrified. Just like that. They say they go into an energy conscious level of reaching a common energy. It's totally wrong. Started in monasteries, Buddhism, Hinduism, all the different areas involved, mainly in the China and the Oriental part. But it is demonic, no doubt about it. Once you reach a certain level, you realize that you're drawn on power. We have no idea, Steve. We're too children. So,
I've often wondered how far a person could go in learning martial arts, like just the techniques and the moves and stuff, without getting into it. Genesis chapter 6 seems to teach us that, if that particular example of the sons of God taking them wives of all which they chose, and there were giants born in those days, whether or not that indicates that on earth spirit beings are if spirit beings are capable of engendering children by human beings. Discussion. Just to go along with this question of demons possibly having the ability to engender children, there is an objection to that view. I believe it's in Matthew. I'll try to find that reference where was the discussion that they had with Jesus about angels neither marry nor are given in marriage. Pardon? Yeah.
When he asked the question, which way she whose husband will this woman be in heaven?
Yes. You don't know. We're all thinking.
Oh, that's maybe not.
Thank you. We're narrowing it down.
They're not given in marriage, is that what you're trying to find?
Yeah.
That's 22:30.
Matthew?
Yeah.
Was that Blair? They're joking, but I don't look there.
Oh, I don't know if that's when you're looking for
It's
it.
terrible. Did you read that, Steve? I don't know if we read it till we look.
There it is. Jesus was talking with the Sadducees. They don't believe in a resurrection anyway, and so that kind of blew their whole scenario. They came saying, Master, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up seed to his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers, and the first, when he had married a wife, died, and having no issue left his wife to his brother, and likewise the second, also the third, unto the 7th, and last of all the woman died also. Therefore in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7th? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry, nor are given in marriage. Now, that point right there. Jesus went on to say, they are not given in marriage, but are like the angels of God in heaven. But see, Genesis chapter 6 doesn't talk about heaven. It talks about angelic activity, possible angelic activity on the earth. And it appears that every time we see an angel who is taking some manifest form down here, that they always appear as men, right? A man like the Son of God. 2 men sitting on the rock, on the tomb after Christ's resurrection. The homosexuals in Sodom sought these angels because they look like ordinary men. Right? There isn't an instance that we know of outside of those strange instances in Ezekiel where spiritual beings take any other appearance other than men. Yeah, but weren't they? But all I'm saying is that it seems to be consistently that when angels take on a human appearance or manifestation, that it's always the male side, and that may explain, whether. See, it's just impossible for us to tell for sure. Like, are these actual human beings that these people embodied, or they just take an appearance, right? If it's an appearance, is it a fully? Is it an appearance with all the bodily functions of the real thing?
Well, they were given meat to eat and that Abraham.
Right? They were able to eat.
And they say he entertained strangers unaware. He entertained the angels unaware. So, in the way he entertained the angels on the people was visitors with strangers and feed them and
okay. So it appears, I would think that it's most reasonable to conclude, you can't be dogmatic about it, but it seems to be reasonable that if angelic, especially the angels that have left their heavenly abode and do have concourse down here on earth, that they could perform ordinary human bodily functions, and therefore they could engender children.
Genesis was just breathing to man the breath of life. Next question.
We know that some demons teach false doctrine, satanic doctrine, 1 Timothy 4. We talked about that yesterday. They apparently seek to have fellowship. They would seek to deceive believers into having fellowship with them, 1 Corinthians 10. And then there are all those examples in the Old Testament where occultic practices are tied to demon activity. One example would be Deuteronomy 18, where God forbade the Jews to be involved in any form of spiritism. When you are come into the land, this is verses 9 to 14, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who maketh his son or daughter pass through the fire. That's child sacrifice. Or who uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter of mediums, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee, thou shalt be perfect, Lord thy God. For these nations whom thou shalt possess hearkened unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God has not permitted thee to do so. Deuteronomy 18, verses 9 to 14. And this is the opposite of true spiritual experience, and it's forbidden. And since it is not of God, then all of these things, this shows you what demons are capable of doing. Of forecasting events would be divination. Of making predictions would be related to observing times. Enchanting, casting spells, witches, spells and hexes, uh, consulters of mediums, giving messages as if they were messages from departed dead or other people from other lives or whatever. Necromancers. We'll talk about some of these activities, but I believe necromancy is, yeah.
They're capable of very, very great powers too, like storm powers, and you go to Job with the wind.
Okay, now whether that was due to Satan's own direct power, or whether it was due to something that his host was capable of conjuring up, I don't know, but I'm not sure. Like, I understand what you're referring to. I always assumed that was Satan's power.
Well, why wouldn't it? They'd be a lesser degree to him.
Perhaps.
It's a manipulation of the elements is all it is.
Just to share with you a personal experience, Steve Tulloch, the year before he was married, he and the girl that he married were both working for Northern Canada Evangelical Missions up in, I think it was Northern BC. Maybe it was the Northwest Territories. But this town that they went into was an Indian town, and the only way you can get there was by train. And I think it was a 1 or 2 day ride on the train. He got there, he was fairly isolated. I think he was the missionaries. The way I understand the story is that the missionaries that he was supposed to be working with were out of town because somebody was sick. So he was there by himself, and he had made an enemy. Somebody, like there was a big drunken brawl on the train on the way up there, and somebody took exception to him, the only white person on the train being there. And he was hiding for his life for the first day or so that he was in town. And he went into the missionary's house one time, and in broad mid-afternoon daylight, he walked in and the place just turned black. Just an oppressive spiritual presence. He says it was the most frightening thing. He says he called on the name of the Lord. Like, they're just capable of doing anything that, or all kinds of things that are just impossible for us in our ordinary senses to perform. I've read material from Northern Canada Evangelical Missions and Arctic missions and stuff about the shaking teepee thing that the Indians practice in their spiritualism, native religion.
Shaking teepee.
And this is basically a means whereby they call down the spirits and communicate with them. And this is a form of worship. And there was one missionary that observed a shaking teepee, and the demons were smoking cigarettes up in the air above the teepee at night.
Wasn't that guy that may not have been a missionary that observed it?
I think it was, yeah.
That was
Well, I don't know. I've got the article downstairs. But he said there were reports in this particular area of dead people being raised from the dead and walking through the streets.
Indians got something like that too. They go to a teepee and he had this axe at his foot and just starts swinging around.
Right.
He's in there, I guess he's a high priest or something. He's supposed to go somewhere and talk to the spirit. That's bad enough with the natives that can get rid of coming to Los Angeles and California and different places. Where the stuff in the state worship. Stories are going on. It's hard for us to accept them.
So we certainly have not exhausted this sort of thing. I believe that what we're seeing today in the charismatic movement and also in places like South America where psychic healing and psychic forecasting and these people have tremendous power. They consult the presidents of the United States. Reagan and his wife were going to one of them, and they were in power. And why? Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that he was demon possessed. But anyways,
What he said, he was a defender of the faith.
now let's move on to discussion of demon possession. We'll only get a start on it today. What do you think demon possession is? Is there any difference between demon possession, demon oppression, demonization? We need to come up with a little more explicit terminology here. What does Schaeffer say about this subject? How would you define demon possession, or do you think that's even a biblical concept?
Demon possession. A lot of places are possessed. Actually, total control.
Can you give an example of someone that was possessed by a demon? Does it say that they were possessed? Okay, here's an example. I think that all of you should try doing a little extra study on this by doing a word study on it. I really believe that. I think that this is such a crucial thing that you and I are probably going to see more and more in our ministries in the day ahead, that you should know what the Greek words are. Okay? The way to do it is to look up specific examples where you think that, like if it says cast out a demon, or possessed by a demon. Remember, we just read that example in Acts 16:16 of this girl. It says she was possessed by a demon. What is the word? Is there a separate word, possessed, and a separate word from demon, or is it daimonizo, demonized, right? And I haven't completed that study myself, but I know that there are different words, and I think that you should run some references on your own just so that you know a little more explicitly what the New Testament precisely teaches about it, and the Greek will help you with that. Okay? It's sort of futile to discuss if there's a difference between demonization, demon possession, demon oppression, when you're just going on the English. Okay? I think that the Greek would probably help us there. So that's what Schaeffer himself says on pages 119 and 20 that that there is a difference between demon possession and demon influence.
Yeah.
According to him, in demon possession, the body is entered and dominated. Dominating control is gained by a demon. Demon control, a warfare from without, is carried on by suggestion, temptation, and influence. And he says there are three basic scriptural facts regarding demon possession. One, apparently there are a host of bodiless evil spirits seeking embodiment. Matthew 12 references an example. They need embodiment to be able to exercise evil acts, and there are examples of that. And they are wicked, unclean, and vicious, as well as apparently humanitarian and religious. Let me read you what Merrill F. Unger says about the three viewpoints on demon invasion of saints. In his book entitled What Demons Can Do to Saints, he says, many Christians naively assume that the potential of satanic power in the life of the regenerated is practically nil. They live in a sort of fool's paradise, imagining that becoming Christians magically shields them from satanic attack or demonic invasion. Other believers, I can't read my writing here. Other believers maintain a more realistic view. They are fully convinced that satanic powers may not only tempt and attack, but if they are not repulsed, they may affect the saint's life and do serious harm in his experience. They may influence him, delude him, despoil him. Always, however, they come from without, attacking the saint, but never exercising total control over him. To such people, the possibility of a born-again believer being invaded by one or more demons is preposterous and, in their view, unbiblical. A third class of believers holds that what seems to be the most realistic view. Grievously sinning saints, and such there are, may go beyond the old nature. In cases of serious, persistent, scandalous sins, such as gross immorality or participation in occultism or occult religionism, demons may exercise control over the believer. Demons may exercise control over the believer until the time that his sin is confessed and forsaken and he is delivered from the evil powers as gained. It is true, of course, that the believer has been delivered from the power of Satan and demons. He has also been delivered from the power of sin, but does that mean he may not fall under its power if he does not count on his deliverance? Likewise, he may, through his old nature, succumb to the temporary control of Satan and demons unless he reckons on his deliverance. That's Unger's view. He actually believes that believers can be controlled from within.
So he's admitting to possible possession.
Yes.
That's good.
The whole line of thinking that resist the devil and he will flee from you. That's basically his line of thinking. If you don't resist,
if you yield to temptation, then I think you open the way for possession.
All I'm saying is you're thinking. Tell me.
Okay, and this is why I want you to do your word studies, because I'm not going to answer for you today, but I think that you should know clearly the difference yourself between the terms used. Is there one consistent term used to describe various aspects, demon influence from without, as well as possession of people within, or are there different words used for the different activities? And I want you to be able to see that for yourself. I think that will help answer this question. Okay. I believe that there are two passages of Scripture that seem to intimate that believers can come under the control of and receive into themselves false spirits. The one is the 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 3 and 4 reference that we were looking at yesterday, where Paul is writing to a church, and he says, I'm afraid for you people, lest you have receive another gospel than that you have already receive another spirit. He actually uses the word receive, lambano. You receive to yourself another spirit than that which you have already received, and another Jesus. The other passage is I think it's 2 Timothy chapter 2, which is a debatable passage, whether it refers to believers or non-believers. In 2 Timothy 2:20, in the whole second part of chapter 2, Paul is talking to Timothy to study to show yourself approved, Timothy, and turn away from false doctrine, and he gives examples of Hymenaeus and Philetus, who had actually denied the resurrection. And he goes on and he says, Timothy, flee youthful lust, follow righteousness, avoid these things. The servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle to all men, apt to teach in patience, in meekness, instructing those that oppose him, if God perhaps will give them repentance to the knowledge of the truth, and that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will. Now, were Hymenaeus and Philetus actually believers that had fallen into apostasy, very gross sin, and therefore opened themselves up to demonic captivity? Or, it doesn't say demonic activity, it actually says the devil there. Or were these simply religious men? So there's a second passage that directly relates to the issue. Okay. And those two have long stuck in my mind about, I personally have come to the conclusion that there's probably not a whole lot of difference between demon oppression and demon possession. That perhaps a better word would be demonization, and let it stand for everything. It's just a matter of degree. And that while believers do have special ability and protection and a position because of their born-again relationship to the Father, that does not necessarily preclude that they cannot fall into sin and even open themselves up to it. And I think that would explain what is happening even in Christian churches today. I have a testimony, or a written testimony, in my files of a wife of a Baptist minister who wanted to speak in tongues so bad that she kept praying about it and praying about it and praying about it, contrary to her own husband's teaching. And she finally got that. And along with it, she started to get filthy, sensuous thoughts. And it got so powerful over her that she was unable to deliver herself from it. And it requires... Finally, she found a minister, but her husband somewhere, that was able to